The importance of recycling has been part of the national conversation for many years. Remember collecting bottles and aluminium cans for cash when you were a kid? But decades down the track, our good intentions are in a bit of a mess with inconsistent approaches and inefficiencies right across the board.
It has led to people carving their own path through the waste problem. Jennifer Macklin is a researcher at Monash University's Sustainable Development Institute. Good morning, Jennifer. Thank you for coming in.
Morning.
Now, why is recycling so confusing from place to place, from state to state?
I think one of the challenges is that councils often have been responsible for recycling, and so they've set up their different systems, and so it is different depending on what council you're in and what state. But also the stuff that we're trying to recycle has actually become more and more sophisticated. We're trying to get more out of our products and packaging, and that can actually make them harder to recycle.
If you look on the lid of the yellow bin, there's a list of things that you can put in there and things that you shouldn't. But how do you then go around and say, well, you know, I reckon this could be recycled. I mean, this is made of plastic. Why can't I recycle this?
That's right. The yellow bin only takes kind of a small selection of all of the things that are actually recyclable that we have in our homes. One of the things the industry has been doing to try and make it easier is actually putting a label. So the Australian recycling label is now on many of the things that we buy from the supermarkets, for example, and it will tell us, you know, which bits can and can't go in the recycling bin. But councils are also sort of our best source because they know exactly what should be going in your bin.
We've got a story on ABC Online today and it's quite fascinating. It talks about the different sorts of things that people do to make sure, you know, the squeezy, the bottle on the top of the sprayer and things that you wouldn't normally be able to chuck into the bin. But there are places that you can go. How do you find those places? Yeah,
it can be a little bit tricky and it can vary, you know, from location to location. There are a number of sort of organisations out there who are providing maybe take back or post back sort of systems where you can take like your toothpaste tubes, those pump packs that you talked about, blister packs from our medicine. So it's often just getting on some of, you know, there's a couple of websites where you can actually just look up and find out what's available to you. But again, your council will often know what these extra programs are.
Do they make a difference, those small-scale programs?
Yeah, it's a good question. The answer is yes, absolutely. They make a difference in two ways. They help by actually letting people know that a lot of these things shouldn't go in the yellow bin. We do have a habit of trying to recycle a lot of things in the yellow bin that aren't always meant to be there, and that can cause problems down the line. So by raising awareness that we should actually be doing something else with these you know, items, that helps make sure that we're using the yellow bin correctly. They also sort of, I guess, do some of the innovation that's necessary to say, well, how can we recycle these trickier things? A lot of them are local though, and the difficulty of kind of scaling them at a national level, you know, can be challenging. So I think they're kind of like the first step, sort of paving the way, but we do need sort of government and industry to kind of, you know, make them sort of more nationally available to get that bigger impact.
Jennifer, you mentioned those problems down the track if you put things into the yellow bin that shouldn't be there. We're always told you've got to wash the containers, you can't put contaminated cardboard. I mean, when you look at, for example, a cardboard box, it's got tape on it or there's oil on it, does that stuff automatically rule it out?
Not necessarily, and again, this is where it is a bit tricky because different councils have access to different facilities that can cope with different levels of what we call contamination. So a lot of our recycling factories are designed to try and deal with things, you know, like envelopes with, you know, plastic windows or paper with staples and things like that. But, you know, your pizza box, if it has a lot of oil and a lot of cheese, can make it harder to turn it back into a good product. So different councils kind of have different rules, but definitely making sure that things are clean, you know, really makes a big difference.
The federal government set a target to recycle 70% of packaging by this year. How are we going?
Yeah, look, we're definitely not there. This was kind of really ambitious targets that were set about 7 or 8 years ago when, and particularly, about 5 or 6 years ago when we were struggling sort of internationally. We used to send a lot of our packaging overseas where a lot of our manufacturing happens. There were some changes that were happening that said that we wanted to actually do better and particularly do better locally. So these targets were brought in to try and really, you know, create some strong movement. Look, we haven't achieved that target, but we have seen a lot of progress. We've seen the way that packaging is designed begin to change so that, you know, more of it is recyclable. We've seen systems be set up to try and, you know, better capture and better sort. So we are seeing that change, but the government's recognised that we need to do more, so they've actually stepped in to help with some of those reforms.
Lorna mentioned at the start there that, you know, we were doing this in the 80s. We at school, we used to line up the aluminium cans. The principal would drive his car all over the cans to squash them because you got 60 cents a kilo for them. Is it surprising to you that 40 years down the track from that sort of thing, we're still having this conversation about, how do we do it and where do we put our cans and should there be drink in them or not?
Yeah, look, I think one of the things we don't think about is that we actually offshored a lot of our manufacturing, over the last 30, 40 years. And so that's partly why we were sending our material overseas, because that's where it's being made into new products. And it meant that we lost a lot of the ability to do it here. Now that we want to do more of it, we're kind of needing to relearn some of those things. We've set up schemes like, most states now have the container deposit schemes where you can take your cans and bottles. We're seeing these little programs, for your toothpaste tubes and things. But we are sort of relearning a lot of this.